2024 has come to an end, and I want to rank every new 2024 horror film that I saw. It was 31 for me. That's a nice spooky number, right? We're gonna go all the way from my least favorite, which I really didn't like, all the way to the top, which is like kind of a new all-time favorite. So welcome to the Cobwebs channel, everybody. My name is Daniel. Thank you so much for clicking on this video, and thank you so much to my patrons for supporting me throughout this past year, going into 2025. And let's jump right in with number 31, Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2, the sequel to the first Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, where Winnie the Pooh and the Pooh characters are out for blood. They want to go kill a bunch of people and terrorize Christopher Robin. Now, I admit, I didn't actually watch the first Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. I saw part of it and it was just like, this thing is really not for me, and I admit I kind of bailed on it. But this one I was getting excited for because I heard it was much better. The production budget was much more. Not that that always makes for a better movie necessarily, but I was interested in seeing like a legit movie version of this idea. And the movie really disappointed me personally. I thought they just didn't do very much with the Winnie the Pooh characters and idea. I thought the hook was, this is an exploitation movie that exploits the Winnie the Pooh IP and turns it into something dark and sinister. And that's technically what it is, but it's really just the names they're taking and really nothing else. Really, this is exploiting and ripping off a different story that is already a horror story. I don't necessarily want to say it, but if you see the movie, you'll know what it is. And just placing it onto Winnie the Pooh. And I just thought that was a whole lot less creative. The kills really weren't impactful for me at all. They're very violent, but I just didn't think they found a way to really gross me out like some other movies do. The makeup is okay, but super silly, and the movie plays everything just very serious. I personally didn't like it, but hey, I'm happy for the filmmakers because they're getting a lot of success, and a lot of other people seem to be really enjoying this thing. At number 30, Infested. This is a French spider horror movie about people living in an apartment complex, and it gets overrun by mutant spiders. Now, this one I was pretty excited for because I just heard it was like super intense, really gross. I actually am freaked out by spiders. I'm not like petrified of them that like I can't go near one. I'll kill a spider or get it out of my house, but they really gross me out. And like arachnophobia is one of the most disturbing film experiences I've ever had. I love arachnophobia. This one never scared me, never grossed me out, never made me feel tense, and I don't totally know why that is. It could be partially that the spiders are mostly CGI, and maybe there's some kind of disconnect there. I will say I really didn't care about the characters at all. I didn't find them interesting. I never feel like I got to know them or just found them interesting at all. They were all really boring for me, so I didn't really care about anybody getting out of this thing. And here's a weird complaint that's super subjective. The movie is full of rap music and hip-hop music, and for some reason, I just feel like that doesn't mesh with horror. Now, I'm not a big rap or hip-hop fan personally, but I think it can really work in action movies, just really pump you up. When it goes in front of a horror sequence, I feel like it kind of kills tension. Infested didn't move the needle for me at all. Never got scared, never grossed out, was just kind of like, okay. At number 29, The Devil's Bath. Now, this is a German folk horror movie about a woman who enters into a new marriage. It doesn't work out the way she wanted it to. She gets extremely depressed and starts wanting to go down a very dark path. Now, this movie was super hyped up for me. I heard it was like one of the new great folk horror period pieces, and I love those kind of movies. And this one, like, it has the look perfectly. It's exactly the kind of look and vibe that I want out of a folk horror film. And it's about a very interesting idea in actual history that I didn't know about, where there was a time where the church, the Catholic Church, had scared people so much about, you know, I don't know if I'm supposed to say the word on YouTube. Most people on YouTube say unalive, so I guess I'll say that. I always find it kind of weird, but they want to not be in this world anymore. But the church has scared them so much that if you do that, you will absolutely be damned to hell. It's the worst crime possible. So what they will do when they really want to exit the world is they will commit murder and then turn themselves in, get executed, but before that they will repent to a priest, and then they hope they'll still be able to get into heaven. That is a very interesting, very dark, untold piece of history. Fascinating. That's what this movie is all about. But the execution just did not work for me at all. I didn't like this movie at all, really. I think the main problem is I really didn't buy the mental decline of the main character. Now, the actress is fantastic, but what happens is she seems totally fine, no worries, a happy person. She gets married, and then her husband denies her on wanting to have sex. several nights in a row. And what she really wants more than anything is she wants to have a baby. And I understand at this point in history, like having a baby, that's what women did. And like, if you didn't do that, society saw you as having no value. So I understand that. But like, he denies her. And at first I was like, I don't understand why this guy isn't going to have sex with her. That doesn't make any sense to me. And then I saw this Letterboxd review and I was like, oh, okay. Like I'm stupid. I get it. But anyway, after that, she has a drastic mental decline, completely loses like her grip on reality even, and goes down this very dark path. And I don't know, like, I didn't feel like they built up to it well enough. You kind of told me that because she doesn't get to have sex for a few nights, she loses her mind. And I was like, I didn't buy it really. The performance is great, but it's really just wallowing in depression and suffering for so long. And it's not until the final moment of the movie where we get something kind of unexpected and interesting. So it's just a steady decline, and I didn't like it. Number 28, Imaginary. This is one of the new Blumhouse movies about a family who moves into a house. There is a teddy bear, and a woman starts to have flashbacks to her childhood that maybe this teddy bear represents a sinister imaginary friend she used to have. Now, Blumhouse really took a beating this year. Hard. People absolutely hated Blumhouse this year. And you know what? I kind of get it, because what they put out was like super generic horror movies. And I think a lot of audiences have just moved beyond that kind of thing. But I thought Imaginary was okay. It was like an okay gateway horror movie, PG-13, kind of felt like a TV movie for me. I think maybe if this was direct to streaming, people would have been less hard on it. It should have been direct to streaming, but it got a theatrical release inexplicably. The dialogue, the acting, it kind of feels like a Hallmark movie, to be honest with you. But I think this movie has some genuine imagination behind it. I think there are some cool visuals with the imaginary friends and the world of the imaginary friends as we go deeper into the film. I don't think it's all bad, but yeah, sure, it's not very good. Number 27, Maxine. Now, this is the third chapter in Ty West's X trilogy. I absolutely loved the first two films, X and Pearl, and they felt like those films are so well connected. They are a perfect duology that complement each other so well. And then we kind of inexplicably get a third film. It feels so tacked on, unnecessary. I'm not going to say the movie is terrible. I was very disappointed in it when I saw it, but I think it's just kind of meh. And the main problems with it is I think it's going for a lot of different things and really succeeds at none of them. It's trying to be a horror movie, but most of the kills are off screen. It doesn't really ever feel like it's going for tension or scares at almost any point in the movie. But then it's also kind of a rise to stardom drama about Maxine trying to become famous. Personally, I don't care about her journey because she makes it very clear she just wants to be famous. Superficially, doesn't seem to care how it happens, doesn't seem to be an artist, so like, I don't really care about her getting famous. And then it's kind of a crime thriller mystery, but again, it's not thrilling because it doesn't feel like it's ever going for tension. And the mystery I thought was really lame, predictable, didn't work for me. So, you know, it looks great for sure. It's got really good actors giving very good performances. Kevin Bacon and Elizabeth Debicki are both particularly really fun. Mia Goth, she feels the least engaged in this one. She's phenomenal in Pearl. And Pearl is just the more interesting character to me. I'm a bigger Pearl fan than a Maxine fan, but the movie just, I didn't really care for it. Number 26, Daddy's Head. This is a direct-to-Shudder movie that actually has a really good setup. It starts out with the father of this family passing away. And the interesting thing is the mom is a stepmom, and they had just gotten married. He got remarried because his first wife passed away. And she really doesn't have like any kind of relationship with the kid yet. I mean, she just joined the family, and now the dad is gone, and now her and the kid are left on their own, and they barely even know each other. That's very interesting. So I thought the human drama of it had a really good hook. And the horror of it is interesting too, because the kid starts seeing this creature in his room in the woods, and it has his daddy's face, his daddy's head. And those sequences are really, really creepy. So I thought this movie was building to something really interesting. And in the end, it just doesn't really go anywhere. It just kind of cuts off, and it doesn't give any answers. It barely gives any payoff or any like thrilling sequences or anything. It's the definition of undercooked. It feels like the filmmakers had a great idea and never figured out what to do with it, never figured out how to pay it off. So I think it's okay. I think it's got very good performances. I think it's got some creepy sequences. It just doesn't really go anywhere. And that's my main problem with it. Number 25, Cuckoo. This is actually a really similar movie in terms of plot and in terms of the problems with it, where it is about a family where the mother has recently passed away, but the father just got remarried, and they travel out to the German Alps for the dad's job because he's an architect. He's going to help design a facility there. And it's an absolutely beautiful place, but we focus on the teenage daughter who's dealing with the loss of her mother, and she starts to see a creepy woman around and starts trying to figure out what's going on with it. And the problems with this are similar to Daddy's Head, where it just feels like they never really figured out what to do with this. Now, this one does have an explanation. We learn what's going on, what's happening with this woman, with this facility they're all staying at that seems very sinister. And I gotta admit, when we got to the reveal, I was just like, what? Like, I guess it feels like it doesn't make sense to me, but I guess it kind of makes sense, but it's just so out there and I don't know, like, it is crazy, but the movie never got me to buy into its craziness. And I was just like, this is what we're doing. It felt kind of dumb, to be honest. And I don't like to use words like stupid or dumb to apply to movies, but sometimes a movie's just kind of dumb. And I kind of felt like Cuckoo was. It's a crazy thing that just, I never bought into the reality of it. And it never felt like it made sense in this world why anybody would be doing this, really. At number 24, Night Swim, the other Blumhouse movie that took a horrible beating. And this one has a pretty generic premise. It's another family. They move into a new house. There's a pool out back, which everybody's super happy about, but it turns out the pool is haunted. I'll be honest with you guys. I just didn't think this was as bad as everybody's saying. We're getting slightly more positive point in the list now. And like, this movie kind of worked for me because I really liked the characters and I really liked the actors who play the parents. Those are Carrie Condon, who actually just won an Oscar, and Wyatt Russell, Kurt Russell's son. Really like both of them. Thought they were very likable, very relatable. They're like definitely not a perfect family. They're going through some real struggles that they're dealing with. And I found it very believable and them very believable as people. And I just got into them. And when we get to the actual scares of it, yeah, it's generic. There's actually some decent atmosphere at the pool at night and there's ghostly apparitions. It's not bad, but yeah, it's generic. It's not that great. It's not that tense or thrilling, certainly not scary, but I cared about the characters enough and I liked the actors enough that it got me through it. So I thought Night Swim was on the better end of okay. Number 23, Destroy All Neighbors, which might be the first direct-to-Shudder movie of the year. It's at least the first one that I watched. I saw it very early on. It's about a guy who is a prog rock musician. He gets this really creepy neighbor who is doing some weird stuff, and he's trying to get that neighbor to be quiet, and he goes down an insane path of murder, of creatures, of insane gore, and it's a crazy movie. Now, the cool thing about this is it's actually starring Alex Winter as the crazy neighbor, Vlad, and he is buried in makeup, in prosthetics, which was a little distracting at first, but the further we get into the movie, the more I actually kind of liked it. And the appeal of this movie is like the gore is insane, the practical effects, the creatures are very fun. This is a gory movie that is absolutely not meant to scare you or gross you out, but really just to be fun, just a fun ride. It's like if a Power Rangers episode was really gory. It's like Psycho Goreman. It's actually a lot like Psycho Goreman if you saw that. I enjoyed the characters. I enjoyed Alex Winter's insane performance. It's nothing great for me. I don't know that I'll ever watch it again, but I certainly enjoyed my time with it. Number 22, Werewolves, one of the last big horror releases of the year. This is basically The Purge. Everyone involved in the movie is super honest about that. This is The Purge, except instead of just psychos running around killing people, there are werewolves. There's one night out of the year where a special moon comes out and it turns pretty much everyone that the moon touches into werewolves. And we're actually following Frank Grillo as our main character, who is also the main character in a couple of the Purge movies, as he's kind of trying to find a cure to this, but also trying to survive and trying to protect his family. And this movie is fine. I watched it and kind of thought I might do a review for it because I was actually sent a screener for it, which is really nice. But I thought I'm just going to cover it in this video because I just didn't have that much to say about it. I'm not the biggest Purge fan, and I'm generally not the biggest action horror fan. When horror is meshed with action, it doesn't always work for me super well, and that's very much what this is. And, you know, the movie's just super derivative. It even rips off some other movies. Like there's something that really rips off 30 Days of Night, but is like so much less impactful and emotional than it is in 30 Days of Night for sure. Because this movie is just popcorn fluff. And that's okay, because the werewolves are actually really cool. I love the look of them. They're practical werewolves. I would love to see more werewolf movies with this kind of design. This is just not the kind of werewolf story that I'm super interested in. But if you want to see badass Frank Grillo and some friends run around in an action thrilling thing trying to fight off werewolves, even if it's like never very emotionally impactful, never very meaningful or anything like that, Werewolves is gonna deliver. 21, Beetlejuice, the long-awaited sequel to the classic Beetlejuice. Now, I love Beetlejuice from 1988, a classic from my childhood, and, you know, I've only come to love Tim Burton more as I get older, more appreciate his good movies, how great of a director he was, and sometimes still is, because I'm not a Tim Burton hater in the modern age. I think he's made some good stuff. But I think Beetlejuice sticks the landing. I certainly don't think it's great. I don't think it holds a candle to the original, but I think it is a totally respectable sequel. A lot of people's main fear about this is it would be packed with CGI. It is not. There are a lot of practical effects that are very cool looking. Winona Ryder and Michael Keaton perfectly slip back into their characters, and so does Catherine O'Hara too. Catherine O'Hara is so great in this, and Jenna Ortega is a great new addition. I think the main problem with this movie is it packs in too many storylines and certainly too many villains. I think if I'm remembering right, there's like 4 villains in this movie. Way too much, especially since Monica Bellucci is set up in the beginning as the big bad, Beetlejuice's wife. And she's kind of like the live action version of the Corpse Bride. And she is awesome. She's a great design, a great presence. I was all in on Monica Bellucci, main villain of Beetlejuice. And they don't deliver. They go on all these different sidetracks. They don't give her enough time. It was disappointing to me, but overall, I thought it was funny. I like the practical effects. I like the actors. I had a good time. Number 20, Salem's Lot. This is another one that was long awaited, for me at least. This was announced years ago as the first theatrical film version of Salem's Lot. All the past versions have been TV miniseries, and this is a theatrical movie, and I was very excited for that. And it was announced like around the time of the It movies, so Stephen King hype, it was pretty exciting. It finally came out years later after being held on the shelf, direct to HBO Max, didn't even get to be theatrical, but I thought the movie was pretty good. I very much enjoyed myself. It is a fun, thrilling vampire hunting ride. I thought the vampire atmosphere was actually pretty cool. The vampires were threatening. I thought the actors, the characters were good enough. The main problem with this movie is it is way too rushed, skips through so much, and it just never feels like it has any depth. It never feels like we really get to know the characters. The characters are charming enough, like they're good, but we never really get to know them. We don't really build towards anything. It's just a fun thrill-a-minute ride. And I'm okay with that because the 70s version by Tobe Hooper, it is the version with room to breathe. It is the version with more depth. It's more interesting. And I'm glad we have that. And it's the better version. But this one, if you just want a 2-hour fun vampire fighting romp, I think it's good stuff. Number 19, The First Omen. Talk about not a long-awaited movie. I think this is a film that no one has ever asked for. A prequel to The Omen where we find out how Damien got conceived before he was adopted by Gregory Peck. Who cares? That sounds so lame. But here it is. It came out and it's quite good. It's very well done. It feels totally like an A24 movie. It felt like, let's lift that A24 Robert Eggers, Hereditary, what's that guy's name? Ari Aster style, and just put it on the Omen franchise. And they did it, and it was pretty successful because it does feel tense. It has creepy atmosphere. It has a great score. The lead performance by Nell Tiger Free as the young nun at the center of this is really fantastic. But for me, the movie still faces the same problems that I knew an Omen prequel would face. It's still exactly what we would expect. It never really goes anywhere that unexpected. You know where this is going to end, and that's where it does. It only has one unexpected thing that it throws in there. that I thought was very unnecessary and kind of overly complicates the original The Omen, where it didn't need it. The Omen is, by the way, a huge favorite for me. I think it's like a perfect horror movie. And like, The Omen was good as is. It didn't need your little twist thrown in there. So that didn't really work for me, but certainly looks great. It's got some images that I've never seen in a movie before. There was one image in particular where I was like, can you do that in a theatrical R-rated film? They got away with it, and I'm blown away by that. Number 18, Stream. So this is a movie from a lot of the crew that made the Terrifier movies. It's directed by Michael Levy, who is a producer on the Terrifier films. It's actually got David Howard Thornton in there, and it's got a pretty cool setup. It's about this kind of dysfunctional family that goes to this hotel resort kind of a thing to stay for the weekend to try to build their family back together. And it turns out there's a game going on in there where people are live streaming themselves, murdering all the people in this hotel and competing for who can have the most creative kills. That is a very good premise if the point of your movie is to deliver crazy gore. And that's very much the point of Stream. And they succeed. I think the gore is really cool. It certainly never reaches the heights of the Terrifier movies. There's nothing as gross or memorable as in those films. But it is a fun, gory slasher. The killers are very distinctive and memorable. David Howard Thornton, you never see his face. He always has a mask on, but you know exactly who he is. Like, yep, that is Art the Clown. Even though he doesn't look like him, you can tell. I was really rooting for this family. The mom is actually played by Danielle Harris, which is cool. There's actually a lot of horror icons that pop up in cameos here. The movie's 2 hours long. The main criticism I heard of it's too long. I didn't really feel that. I had a good time with it. I guess my only real criticism is there's not a lot of substance here. There's not a lot to make it super memorable. But if you just want a fun, gory slasher to give you a good ride for 2 hours, Stream is going to deliver. Number 17, stop motion. So this is about a stop motion animator who is trying to finish up her mother's film. She was like an iconic stop motion animator, but decides to then go down her own path and creates increasingly frightening and grotesque creations to make a really creepy stop motion film. And she might just start to lose her mind, or maybe the stop motion things are coming to life, and it's pretty trippy. So the great thing about this movie for sure is the stop motion creations are seriously creepy looking. The film that she's making is so unsettling, and I just really applaud these filmmakers for making just something that creeped me out that much. This is another one with a phenomenal lead female performance from Aisling Franciosi. I really hope I pronounced that right, but it's possible I didn't. She's so great and really good at this character who is just degrading in this increasingly terrible mental state. And there is a moment of gore in this film that is, for me, the most disturbing moment of gore that I saw all year. Like, not in Terrifier 3, in this movie. Like, I felt like I was getting a heart attack. And that really just shows you that sometimes the smaller, more subtler gore is the more effective for sure. And stop motion really shows that. The film was very reminiscent of a lot of other films that have come out recently about young women losing their mind. It was very reminiscent of Censor for me, which I think is a much better movie. But the stop motion stuff is what really makes it stand out, and it really is an interesting movie. Number 16, Strange Darling. This is the point in the list where I'm getting very positive. From this film on up, I highly recommend all of these movies without reservation. Strange Darling is a fascinating movie about two people who go to a hotel room to have a one-night stand, and there might just be a serial killer involved, and things get very scary and intense. The interesting thing about this film is it is told out of order, and it is upfront with you about that from the start. It says this is told in 6 chapters, not in order. We start out with I think chapter 3 or something, and we bounce around. And that's what makes this film unique, because if it wasn't for that, it would be much more straightforward, much more of a normal movie without a lot of surprises. But the way it tells it out of order makes it very unexpected, has fascinating twists and turns, and makes it feel like very well written. The 2 lead performances are incredible. Loved Kyle Gallner in this movie. He's kind of a rising star of more independent horror movies and even some studio horror too. He's so good in this. The film is just very intense. It looks great. It is such a retro 70s kind of aesthetic. It has an awesome soundtrack of kinds of music that I don't hear in movies a lot that are very interesting and added an uneasy vibe to it. Strange Darling is pretty great. Number 15, Frogman. Probably the biggest surprise of the year for me. This is a very low budget found footage film about a guy who believes that he saw the Frogman when he was a kid and becomes a documentary filmmaker in order to try to prove that he's not crazy, the Frogman exists. He goes to a town called Loveland that is known for the Frogman cryptid sightings, and he takes his friends there to prove this creature's existence. This movie is really good. Now, it takes a little while to build up to the Frogman stuff, as it should. It shouldn't just jump into that stuff right away. Give us some character build up, some story build up. And I loved all of the build up because I really like the actors and the characters a lot. I loved watching them just explore this town of Loveland, going into these different shops, talking to the locals about Frogman sightings, seeing all the Frogman literature and memorabilia and stuff. Like, that's just, I wanted to be there. Like, I want to go to this town. I want to hear about Frogman and see all the knickknacks, and that part was just super, super fun for me. But then once we get into the woods and the Frogman stuff starts coming out, it delivers. And I wasn't sure how much it was going to deliver because I knew this is a low budget movie. I'm going to try not to expect too much. But as a Frogman movie, this is a Frogman movie, and I applaud that. Number 14, Lisa Frankenstein. So this is a horror movie meets teen rom-com about a quirky girl who likes to go visit a particular gravestone, and when a lightning storm brings that corpse to life, he comes to visit her, and she starts trying to build him up into being the perfect boyfriend, shall we say. So Lisa Frankenstein is incredibly fun. I thought it really worked for me as a quirky teen comedy, which I like teen comedies generally, and this one really works as that, but it's way darker and more macabre than I expected. I was kind of expecting the horror elements to be kind of minimal, more so just be a cutesy teen movie. I was wrong. The horror elements are actually really solid. It's much darker than I expected. Now, this is one of my favorite performances of the year. In the lead as Lisa, you've got Catherine Newton. She's so good. And this movie is written by Diablo Cody, who wrote stuff like Juno and Jennifer's Body. And I think of all the actors that have had to handle Diablo Cody's weird, quirky dialogue, Catherine Newton handles it the best. I thought she's able to deliver it the most natural, and just her quirky character, she made it fit so well. It's just so fun. It takes place in the 80s, got a great 80s vibe and soundtrack. What a great time. Number 13, Low Lives. Now, this is a Tubi original film about a family who's on a cross-country road trip, kind of get a little lost and stop in this super rural area and meet another family that lives in the backwoods, and things go wrong. Now, full disclosure, a podcasting friend of mine actually directed this movie, co-directed. His name is Mitch Oliver. He hosted the Terror Table podcast. I've been on many episodes of that show, and he's been on episodes of podcasts that I've done. So I was very excited to check this out to see what he came up with, because I was so excited for him when he decided to, strike out and become a filmmaker, and he's doing it. I was genuinely impressed by this movie. It's really enjoyable, really fun. It has wild twists and turns that really kept me guessing. It's got some crazy gore, always using practical effects that are very fun. Performances are great. Low Lives is just, it's a thrill ride that delivers, it's going to give you some laughs. It's going to give you some shocks, some jumps, some, oh my gosh, I didn't see that coming. Number 12, The Substance, maybe the biggest horror film of the year in terms of buzz and getting people talking. A film about an aging Hollywood actress who decides to try the substance, which can create a better, younger version of yourself, but only for 7 days at a time. And she must respect the balance. 7 days on, 7 days off. And it is a bonkers film. It is the craziest film of the year, both in terms of what actually happens, the events that it is exploring, the practical effects that are the grossest things I have seen all year, grossest things I've seen in a long time. And in terms of the filmmaking, the very filmmaking of it is bonkers. Like, it is some of the most editing, crazy shots, crazy style that I have seen almost ever. And it all adds up to a movie that I really respect. I'm very glad it exists, that it is doing for the horror genre what it is doing, giving it a lot of respect. But it is a movie that I admit is a bit much for me. It is so gross, and the filmmaking is so bombastic and insane that I kind of can't imagine watching it again. Now, it's this high on the list because I really respect it, but there are movies lower on the list that I will definitely rewatch more. But that's okay. Rewatchability isn't everything. And this movie gave me an insane, gross out, grotesque experience. And I've got to respect that. Demi Moore was awesome in the lead. Dennis Quaid is really fun in a weirdo character role in this too. So got to give a ton of props to The Substance, even if it's not a movie totally for me. Number 11, Late Night with the Devil. Probably the Shudder release that got the most buzz this year. It did get a bit of a theatrical release, but not around me, so I saw it on Shudder. And it is about a 70s talk show host, the fictional talk show. The idea of it is it's showing you an actual episode that aired back in the 70s in which he decided to have on a demon-possessed girl as a guest and interview the devil. Even though this doesn't quite crack my top 10, I think this is one of the movies that I will rewatch the most, simply because of its comfy, cozy feel. The period recreation of the 70s is spectacular. It really feels like you're watching an old talk show. The show actually takes place on Halloween, so you've got Halloween decorations around, and I just loved the vibe of this movie. I loved living within it. I'll probably revisit it time and time again. David Dastmalchian is really good in the lead. He's a character actor I've seen in, supporting parts a lot, but it's great to see him in the lead, and I thought he was great. And the girl, the demon-possessed girl he has on, very creepy. There are elements to her possession that are not normal for normal exorcism movies, that are different, and I thought I liked a lot. I liked a little bit better than like typical exorcism lore. Genuinely creepy stuff. I think the only missteps for me is it falls off a little bit at the end for me, where it kind of abandons its found footage rules, becomes something a little bit bigger. I think there's some interesting stuff, but I would have preferred it to really stick to its guns on exactly what it is, kind of like Ghostwatch does. Ghostwatch is one of my favorites, but it's ultimately a small complaint. I love the atmosphere, the vibe, the creepiness. It's a great time. Cracking into the top 10, we've got Terrifier 3. Now, I have become a big fan of the Terrifier franchise. I thought the first one was okay, but the second one I was just a huge fan of, and that is still my favorite in the series. And Terrifier 3 continues things from that second film very well in terms of expanding the lore, making it much more of a supernatural slasher franchise than you might expect from just a killer clown movie. That stuff I love, because if it was just about a killer clown just dismembering people, that's okay, but like it's really the ideas and the lore behind this that's really drawing me into it. And the main character of Sienna carried over so well, going to some very interesting places in this movie. Terrifier 3 is an extremely bloody, gory movie, but in a way that I found very fun. For me, these Terrifier movies are so extreme in their gore that like I don't take it seriously. It doesn't feel real to me. Like that moment I referenced in Stop Motion, a very small moment of gore where no one actually dies, is way more disturbing to me than anything in Terrifier 3. Now, this movie does build on the gore, and it goes to some very dark places towards the end, but still, these are fun. While I'm not the biggest fan of the torture genre, these are fun for me. I love the character of Art the Clown. David Howard Thornton is just spectacular in it. And the Christmas atmosphere is like the cherry on top. I love that they made this a Christmas movie. When I saw the second film and it was like the ultimate Halloween movie, I thought I want them to do Christmas next, and they did it, and I'm so happy about that. At number 9, Abigail. From the filmmakers behind the last two Scream movies and Ready or Not, we get a new vampire film. It's about some hardened criminals who pulled a job to kidnap the daughter of a very rich man and hold her for ransom, but they find out this girl is, well, a vampire. You watch any preview of this movie, you hear anybody talk about it, it's a vampire movie, a little girl ballerina vampire film, and it is a wild ride. Now, I adored the lead performances in this and the characters. The characters are so well drawn, so interesting, so entertaining to watch. Melissa Barrera is the lead. She's becoming like one of my favorite modern actresses. I am a huge fan of Melissa Barrera, especially because of In the Heights, which is actually a musical she did before the Scream movies. She is awesome in that movie. But then you got like Dan Stevens, who is maybe the most memorable character here. Dan Stevens, like when I saw him in The Guest, I mean, the promise of him in The Guest was so great, and I felt like he never quite reached those heights again. But I think he does finally in Abigail. Man, I just adored the characters. The vampire action is fun. It is bloody, violent. There is an enormous amount of practical blood that they used in this movie, including like something that they call blood cannons to make blood explode everywhere. And it's a wild ride. It is extremely entertaining. I love it. Number 8, Alien Romulus. Definitely one of the biggest surprises of the year for me, because the Alien franchise, it's not one of the franchises that I'm the most passionate about. It's certainly got some great movies for sure, but like I've just never been passionate about the xenomorph and about the world of these movies. It's just not quite my thing, I guess. And I really didn't like where Ridley Scott was taking the franchise in Prometheus and Alien Covenant. The things he's interested in this franchise do not interest me, and I didn't like those movies. But Alien Romulus takes it back to basics. It brings the franchise back to being straight up horror, and it is one of the most intense, frightening, and enjoyable thrill ride experiences that I saw this year. This movie felt like going through a haunted house attraction where just you're going through a creepy atmosphere. Things are jumping out at you. There's gore, there's scares. And it was just a great time. I think some Alien purist fans maybe aren't happy that this isn't continuing the big ideas from Ridley Scott, that it's just kind of taking it to just be a basic horror movie. But that's why I liked it so much. And I thought if we're going to call it a basic horror movie, it's extremely effective and it's really good at it. It's directed by Fede Alvarez, who I love. He made the Evil Dead remake, which I think is incredible. Some folks complained about this having a little too much CGI. I never noticed it. I'm not denying that there's CGI in the movie, don't get me wrong, but it was all very good that it was never noticeable for me. And the sets all feel so real and lived in. I saw this not long after I saw Deadpool and Wolverine, which practically all takes place in front of a green screen. And I was like, man, this looks like a movie. Like it was such a breath of fresh air. I like the characters, especially the android character. He really stole the show for me. And the xenomorphs, the face huggers, this movie made them scary again, and I am so happy about it. Number 7, Immaculate. Now, this is the nunsploitation movie of the year that is my preference. It came out just a little bit before The First Omen, and they got compared a lot because they're both nun movies about the birth of something scary. They're surprisingly similar, but I like this one better. I love Sydney Sweeney in the lead role. I haven't seen her in a lot of stuff, but I thought she was great in this movie. So likable. You just so get on her side. And the journey that she goes through in being a virgin who gets pregnant and the church treats her like the second coming of the Virgin Mary. That's all very interesting. But the journey she goes through is so unexpected. Where The First Omen is very predictable because it's a prequel. You know where it's going. You don't know where Immaculate is going. And where it does go, I thought was insane. Like, I couldn't believe they went there in a big movie, but I respected it. I was like, yeah, you take that chance, Immaculate. That is a great idea. That is nuts. Number 6, In a Violent Nature, perhaps the most divisive horror film of the year. Some folks are loving it because they find it to be a really interesting, slow, atmospheric experience. And some people think it's extremely boring. It's just a guy walking through the woods. Because the idea of it is it's basically a Friday the 13th movie, not officially. The character is not Jason. His name is Johnny. He's got a distinctive look, but he's basically Jason. But it's what if a Friday the 13th movie followed the killer and you just follow him the whole time instead of the campers? Some people think that's super boring. I did not. I adored the atmosphere of this movie, the just meditative experience that it took me on. And it was never boring for me because it's not really just a guy walking through the woods. There's very little time that's literally just watching a guy walking. Like, you always know what he's walking towards. You understand the story. And in terms of the very subtle and simple storytelling they give you, it's enough. There's people talking in the background. He's watching characters. There's always something going on. So they did a great job taking an idea that could have been boring, and for me, making it not boring. But I'm pretty tolerant of slow movies. I tend to like slow build horror, and this one super delivered for me. The kills were incredible. Where Terrifier 3 makes them big, bombastic, and crazy. There's some crazy stuff in this movie, but it's slower and more gut-wrenching, and it kind of feels like you are following a true monster in a way that makes you uncomfortable. Johnny feels like I shouldn't be following this guy. This is wrong. And that's a really cool feeling for a horror movie to give you. Cracking into the top 5, we've got Oddity, a film that opens with an incredible sequence of a woman who is staying the night at a remote house, and someone knocks at her door and says, "Hey, somebody followed you into that house. Open the door so I can help you." And she doesn't know that anything followed her in there. So she's like this question of, is he telling the truth, or is he saying this to try to kill me? We then cut forward. We don't know what happened, but she is dead. And her twin sister, a blind medium, is trying to investigate and find out what truly happened. A movie that is so effectively creepy. I heard director Jeff Bezos, who didn't make this movie, but I heard him talking about this, and he called it like a feature-length Tales from the Crypt episode. That is kind of what this is. The atmosphere is really, really cool and creepy. There's this wooden man that the blind medium uses for certain things that is so creepy. For me, I think Oddity is the scariest movie of the year. There is a jump scare in this movie that absolutely chilled me to my core. So unsettled me. Not a cheap fake out jump scare, like one of the most well-crafted, effective, and lasting jump scares I've seen in a long time. So I really commend this movie for that. The characters, the mystery, it's all very interesting and super creepy. At number 4, Heretic, a film about two Mormon missionaries who go door to door preaching the gospel, and they come to the house of an elderly British man played by Hugh Grant, who invites them in, and he really wants to deeply discuss religion, theology, and the situation gets increasingly more threatening as they discover they are not welcome to leave. Now, this is a movie I have been really looking forward to because it's a horror movie starring Hugh Grant. And I'm actually a huge fan of Hugh Grant. He's one of my favorite actors. Like, I love his old rom-coms and stuff. I think he's so much fun to watch. And I was just so curious, him as like a horror villain, what's that like? Well, it's great. It's really, really great. And I think this movie will really hit you if you are a person who is particularly interested in the ideas behind religion and theology, especially if you are a skeptic, if you question, if you think deeply about these things. I am that kind of a person, so this movie is perfect for me because I found all of the long discussions. Some people call this movie too talky, but all of the long discussions about these ideas fascinating, about the existence of God, how could it work, different denominations of Christianity, how do they conflict? It's all fascinating, and listening to Hugh Grant just monologue about it and having these girls kind of go at him about these things is just so interesting. But I also think if you're a religious person, this movie's not disrespectful at all. It's just really interested in exploring these ideas. So I think no matter who you are, if you're interested in these ideas from a positive or negative perspective, I think you're going to be very interested. Hugh Grant is spectacular in this, as he is in every movie, so that's definitely no surprise whatsoever. And it's got some creepy stuff that I was not expecting. Hugh Grant is certainly not the only creepy thing in the movie. There are some things that threw me off that I just always enjoyed the ride this movie was taking me down. I think it is an excellent film. Number 3, The Vordelak, a French period piece folk horror movie based on a Russian novel called The Family of the Vordelak, in which a man is lost in the woods. He comes up to a small cottage and he finds out that their father is missing. And he said if he ever comes back, they must kill him because that means he has become a Vordelak. And guess what? He comes back. So a Vordelak is basically a vampire. It is a creature of folklore that matches a vampire in most all ways. It is a vampire that only feeds on the blood of its loved ones. And I just adored the atmosphere of this film. This is a period piece folk horror film that worked perfectly for me. I love the way it looks. I love how authentic it feels. Even the costume of the main character, a Marquis, is very true to the time period. And even his costume, keeping him in that for the movie, I think is a bold choice. And I respect that they stick with it. But an even bolder choice is what they do with the vampire, because what he is, and you'll see this if you watch the previews, you'll hear this if you hear the director talk about the film in interviews. It's a puppet. It is a marionette. He went with a very practical effects, creep show like, my buddies at the Splattercast actually are compared it to creep show, so I got to give them credit. Creep show like just creature. And I loved it. I know for a lot of people, it'll take them out of the reality of the movie, but I don't care about that. It just feels like a fairy tale experience. The Vordelak is such a weird, unique film that worked perfectly for me. Number 2, Longlegs, one of the biggest breakout horror hits of the year, and that makes me so happy. It takes place in the 90s, and it is this slow, atmospheric serial killer thriller about Micah Monroe as a young, socially awkward FBI agent who is obsessed with solving the mystery of who is the Longlegs killer, a serial killer who is slaughtering people. It is directed by Oz Perkins, who I have become a huge fan of over the years. He directed The Blackcoat's Daughter, that I think is one of the top horror films of the whole 2010s. And I just adored the slow burn pace of this movie, an atmosphere that I love to live in that genuinely creeped me out. I thought Micah Monroe's performance was spectacular. And the main thing that everybody talks about with this movie, Nicolas Cage as Longlegs, I loved it. I can totally understand it being divisive. It's Nick Cage going crazy Nick Cage, but you know, I didn't just see Nick Cage. I thought he created a unique character that's not like every other crazy character he's done. It's different. He's in a lot of interesting makeup, and the ideas behind him, especially in terms of the lore that they delve into as the movie goes further, because this isn't just a serial killer movie. It's got more on its mind. It's got more up its sleeve, which I really appreciated. All of that really worked for me. And I think it's one of the creepiest, scariest movies of the year for sure. And it was my favorite movie of the year until I saw my number 1. My number 1 is, of course, Nosferatu, Robert Eggers' epic vampire tale, his version of the original Nosferatu from the 1920s, which is an unauthorized adaptation of Dracula. So this is a new Dracula film. And this feels like the Dracula film for this generation, but also the vampire film of the whole 2000s. I would say this is the greatest vampire film we have got since Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula of 1992, which I would compare this movie the closest to. It's very different from both original Nosferatu films. What I loved about this movie so much is it felt like a vampire movie from a super vampire history nerd. You can feel that he really wanted to make vampires scary again, which they've rarely been in the 2000s. I think since the Twilight films, people have been scared to try to make vampires scary, but 2024 is the year of vampire movies coming back. They have come back in a huge way this year. So he went back to the original folklore, and it feels like a movie from a history nerd who like puts these ancient legends and beliefs around vampires that like I've read about that I've never seen in a movie before. So all of that made me incredibly happy. And the look of Count Orlok, the main vampire, is very divisive for people. I loved it because it felt so authentic to Bram Stoker's novel, but also to original folklore, that vampires are rotting corpses that walk around and suck blood, and he looks like a Transylvanian nobleman very authentically in ways that people don't like, but I liked because of how different it was. It didn't feel influenced by past vampire films. Now, I put out a review for this. A lot of people have been complaining that the movie is boring. I don't see it. I don't understand. I didn't find the movie even slightly boring. I thought it was riveting. I actually think it's Robert Eggers' fastest paced movie he's ever made, his highest energy movie he's ever made. I just can't imagine it being boring. When I watched it, it never occurred to me that anybody would think that. So I don't know, guys. But Nosferatu is without question a perfect movie for me, for my taste, and it is the movie I will remember this year for. So that's my list, but let me know, what new horror films did you watch this year? How would you rank them? Let me know down in the comments below. I would love to hear about it. And if you want to spend more time with me, check out this video, which is my top 20 older films that I watched for the first time last year. And give a like and a subscribe if you haven't yet. Thank you all so much, and Happy New Year. I'll see you next time.